Hi, everybody. Are y'all able to hear us?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yes.
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 Off to a good start. We have all the We'll get started. Welcome to the ERC Advisory Board meeting today. We will get moving on our agenda. Before we start, I'm going to take a quick roll. We have quorum for our board members. Yuji, here. Rayon,
Here.
Celeste. I'll come back. Her. Megan.
Here.
Kathy.
Here.
Jackie.
Here.
Holly.
Here.
Linda.
Here.
Angie.
Here.
I'll come back around to see if the left.
Here.
Great. All right, we got everybody. So next item on the agenda is public testimonies. We don't have anyone scheduled to provide testimony today. Next item is consideration of possible action to approve the minutes from our December 11th, 2025 advisory board meeting. Do we have anyone who would like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
This is Rayon. I move to approve.
Great.
This is Jackie. I second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Great. So next item is consideration and possible action to approve additional data and amendment requests. So, oh, sorry. I'll get one. Oh. Consideration and possible action to approve the consent. I apologize. So today we have, let me get myself a few extension requests that we have put on the consent calendar. I'll read them out. And if anyone on the board would like us to remove anything from the consent calendar, you can request that. So today's consent calendar includes extension 4, UTD 160, extension 5, UTD 184, extension 6, UTD 204, extension 7, UTD 205, extension 8, UTD 207, extension 9, UTD 208, extension 10, UTD 209, extension 11, UTD 210, extension 12, UTA 207, extension 13, UTA 238, and extension 14, UTA 239. Do any members have a request to remove any of these from their consent calendar? If not, do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move to approve, Celeste.
Megan, I second.
Megan. Thanks, Megan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Great, thanks. Okay, now do consideration and possible action to approve additional data and amendment requests. So we will start with data 1 UHO 73. Any questions or comments from the board? And if not, their motion to approve.
This is Holly. I motion to approve.
This is Angie. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. On to data 2, UH093. Any questions or comments from the board? And if not, do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve Celeste.
I'll second. Yuji? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Data 3, UH097. Questions or comments on this one? And if not, do I have a motion to approve?
This is Angie. I'll move to approve.
I'll second. Yuji? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, data 4, UH113. Questions or comments on this one? If not, do I have a motion to approve?
This is Megan. I motion to approve.
Okay.
This is Jackie. I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, data 5, UH114. Questions or comments on this one? If not, do I have a motion to approve?
This is Holly. I motion to approve.
A second, Celeste.
Great, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Data 6, UTD 173. Any comments from the board? And if not, is there a motion to approve?
This is Kathy. I move to approve.
This is Jackie. I second.
Great, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Data 7, UTD 187. Questions, comments from the board? And if not, do I have a motion to approve?
This is Kathy. I move to approve.
Second. I'll second. Yuji? Great, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Data 8, UTD 246. Questions on this one? If not, do I have a motion to approve?
This is Angie. I'll move to approve.
This is Megan. I'll second.
Great, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Data 9, UTA 231. Questions or comments? Oh, yeah, we noticed the end date is December, so does this also need to maybe in the next meeting be brought for an extension?
Wait, so you're saying the end date is December, not now?
It was December
No.
2025. That's what we have in our records, is the end date was 12/14/2025.
I think, hi, this is Barbara Biasi. I think we requested and were granted an extension during the last
Oh, there is
meeting.
a prior, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great. Any other questions on this one? And if not, do I have a motion to approve?
This is Kathy. I move to approve.
I'll second Celeste.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, data 10, UTA 256. Questions on this one? And if not, is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve Celeste.
I second Rayon.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, so moving to item 6, consideration and possible action to approve extension requests. Okay, extension versus extension 1 UH 033. Questions or comments from the board on this project? Not, do I have a motion to approve?
This is Jackie. I move to approve.
Angie, I'll second.
Great, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Now extension 2, UTD 119. Questions or comments on this one? If not, do I have a motion to approve?
This is Kathy. I move to approve.
This is Megan. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. And then extension 3, UTD 146. Questions on this one? Not have a motion to approve.
I move to approve Celeste.
Have a second.
I second Jackie.
Great, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And the rest, I believe, we're all on approved on consent. Great. All right. So now moving to item 7, consideration and possible action to approve new research projects. And we'll start with proposal 1, including remote access request UH 128, the effect of neighborhood change on academic achievements. Do we have an overview of this one?
Hi, yes,
Hi.
I can present. Okay, thank you for the opportunity to present our project, The Effect of Neighborhood Change on Academic Achievement. So our project asks, how does neighborhood demographic and socioeconomic change, often referred to as gentrification, affect students' academic and long-run labor market outcomes in Texas? Specifically, we're going to examine whether neighborhood change shifts the composition of nearby schools and how these shifts affect test scores, attendance, discipline, graduation, post-secondary enrollment, and later earnings. We also focus on whether earnings differ for incumbent students and whether neighborhood change influences teacher recruitment and retention. The ERC data are essential to this project because we need longitudinal student-level administrative records to follow students over time and into adulthood. School-level averages are not sufficient as we must be able to distinguish incumbent students from newly arriving students, track student mobility across schools and districts, and connect K-12 experiences to post-secondary enrollment and earnings. These data also allow us to test whether exposure to gentrification earlier in life has more persistent effects than exposure in high school. We believe this project is highly relevant for Texas policy. The state has experienced rapid population growth and substantial neighborhood change, yet we have limited statewide evidence on how these shifts affect student achievement and mobility. Our study will provide rigorous evidence on how neighborhood change translates into changes within schools and how these changes affect both students and teachers. We have applied to merge publicly available school attendance boundary data and census demographic data with the ERC records. Because we do not observe residential addresses, these data allow us to measure demographic change in the neighborhood zoned to each school. Without them, we could study school composition changes, but not directly link them to neighborhood change. Overall, this project will provide some of the first statewide evidence on how neighborhood change shapes educational and labor market trajectories for Texas students and how it influences teacher recruitment and retention in affected schools.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board for the researcher? You mentioned in the proposal about that you will use census tract boundaries to determine which tracts are zoned to schools. But in the data dictionary, you don't have any census tract related variables. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
so by the time we merge, we'll aggregate up. So we'll have for each school, it will like merge on the school variable. It will be the aggregate up of all the tracts demographic information for each tract that's zoned to that school.
One other comment is that there's no ACTE or SAT ERC files available, so I would recommend removing those too.
Okay.
And this is Megan. I just was curious about in the research methods part, you discussed comparing outcomes within Houston ISD. Is that your primary focus?
We would like to do a case study within it. I think we'll at first do across the whole state, but then we would like to exploit some variation in either housing policy or a natural disaster within Houston specifically and look at that.
Okay. I always think it's beneficial also to connect with the district should you focus on that just as a district
Okay.
person.
And I think you talked about this in the proposal, but just wanted to hear from you in your own words about kind of connecting the work you're doing specifically in these research questions with policy. So how exactly could what you're finding through this analysis be connected to
Yeah. So I think in two
conversations?
separate I think in two separate ways. First, there has been efforts to mitigate the effects of having to change schools, of mobility changes and things of that nature. So just quantifying kind of what neighborhood change, how much that causes students to have to change schools, and having more information on the schools in which they move to. But also there's varying district policies. There's in terms of like intra-district transfers and inter-district transfers. And so we can test whether the effects of gentrification vary by different districts and see if these correlate in any ways with any of these policies to be able to speak to how policy writ large that's already enacted affects the outcomes that we see.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Sorry, I want to clarify one more thing about the policy question. So I get what you're saying, but since the changes you're looking at in neighborhoods are gentrification, so just changes, not necessarily the result, not necessarily attached to a policy about changing schools of a student. Just could you give a little more connection between the way you're measuring the changes in neighborhoods and how that links to a policy that you mentioned, like policies that about a student changing schools?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, we can see if in districts in which students are allowed to attend schools outside of their own school zone, if, for example, that makes students less like students stay in that school for longer. And so incumbent students, say, could benefit more from gentrification if their school changes more. And even if if their family does move, they are still allowed to go to that school. Or the other hand, which is that if families move in, they can send their students or their children to schools that are not their zone school. And so even if your neighborhood changes, your actual school might not change that much. And we can disentangle how we see the effects change for a policy like inter-district transfers or intra-district transfers.
Appreciate the additional detail. Thank you.
Yeah, can I just piggyback on your comment, Melissa? I think, I mean, in the proposal, the researchers discuss choice, school choice, somewhat. And I'm wondering if, I don't think it's necessary to put in the proposal, but like, looking at the effects of gentrification in different districts with different kind of choice models to see if the effects are mitigated by, let's say, Dallas ISD's choice model or Houston's choice model, because I think that could help. I mean, that is a specific policy in place that is supposed to afford students more options when their neighborhoods change. And, so I'm just, I'm curious whether in your analysis, could you just not only focus on Houston, but other large scale districts that give students options to go to a school outside of their attendance zone? And what are,
Yes.
that's similar to what you're saying, but I just wanted to add some specificity to
Yes.
your comment.
No, thank you. Yes, we definitely plan on doing that. We've already started to look into some of the bigger districts in Texas, both whether they allow inter and intra district transfers. And so we can then look at multiple different districts and see if we think effects change and how that interacts with their choice policies.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments from the board? If not, do I have a motion to approve? Was there any amendments?
Moving SAT ERC.
Oh, with the amendment, do I have a motion to approve with the amendment of removing the request for ACT, SAT data files?
This is Angie. I'll move to approve.
And I will second Angie.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, proposal 2, including remote access request UH 129, the impact of United Way of Greater Houston's integrated client journey on post-secondary and labor market outcomes. We have researchers.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Welcome.
Yes. Hello. Thank you, Melissa. My name is Flavio Cunha. I'm here from Rice University. I'm here to ask for your authorization to conduct a study to evaluate the integrated client journey program. So it's a large-scale service navigation program run by the United Way here in Greater Houston. It's for working in individuals and families who are ALS, asset limited, income constrained, and employed. They are working and earning income, but they can't make ends meet. And then what the ICJ does is to connect them with workforce training. And if they are already in workforce training, or they want to go into workforce training, but they can't because they don't have access to childcare or they don't have access to transportation, United Way works with 100 partner agencies to address those limitations that prevent them from engaging with workforce training. So we've already done some preliminary analysis, and one of the fascinating things about this program is that they conduct really deep qualitative interviews to determine someone's eligibility and readiness for this program. But an interesting aspect of this is that nearly 1 out of 4 individuals who are admitted into the program, they are false positives. They are really not ready to be part of this program. And then you have 1 in 20 that are ready to be in this program, but then they are deemed not ready. So it's a program with a large number of false positives and a small number of false negatives. And what we want to do is to actually conduct a study that evaluates the long-term impact of this program in terms of workforce, not only higher education, but also workforce outcomes as well. What we've been able to do is to construct a latent true readiness variable that identifies who could benefit from this intervention. We have the navigators' assessments of whether they are ready or not ready, so we're able to do that. But the other aspect that is so interesting is individuals are enrolling into this program, and then they may be deemed ready or not ready. But if they're deemed ready, they may actually not necessarily engage with this program. So there's a selection problem that arises out of that. So what we're proposing is a structural model that would take into account this issue of false positives and false negatives in the selection model, so that we can actually identify what the impact of this program is. And then we're going to introduce so by simulating a few policy scenarios, one of which is, of course, what would happen if navigator accuracy would improve. I don't know if the navigators are actually making really bad calls. Some of the individuals that are actually deemed false negatives, they actually tend to have a lot of engagement with the program. So it's a question to be determined. And what if we targeted based on predicted benefit rather than assessed readiness? It's a dense interview, but the dense interview doesn't necessarily capture what the benefit of participating in the program would be. And then these simulations would actually directly inform how to design these types of programs. There aren't a lot of studies nationally about these types of navigation programs and how they can actually impact people long term, especially when we take into account the fact that at the intake we may be making mistakes about someone being ready or not ready. So we would like to get data from the TA data to see who these individuals were before they actually got engaged into the program, TCB data, and to see what the post-secondary enrollment persistence and completion is, since this type of training is a primary interest of this program. And then we would like to see what the impact is on quarterly earnings and labor force participation over time. And this is why we ask access to the TWC data. We have already secured data from the United Way with that allows us to do that linkage. We provide documentation in our proposal, and of course, we're going to respect all privacy requirements that are deemed important by the Texas ERC. So it's a rigorous evaluation of a real large-scale program. It's now about 4,000 individuals in Houston alone. I think that this is a program that could be scaled to any United Way across the world, particularly across the United States. And but we don't know. We don't know what the education impacts are, and we don't know yet what the labor market impacts are. So thank you.
Thank you. We have questions or comments from the board, from the researcher.
Yeah, I was just curious, could you provide kind of a description of the program? And in particular, I'm curious about who's eligible to participate in the program and how readiness is defined by the program.
Yeah, so I am. So it's a qualitative interview, and that's an issue that there is a lot of subjectivity about who is actually ready. What they're trying to separate are two groups of people. Are individuals that are calling United Way because they have an emergency situation. I can't pay my rent this month. This type of individual would not be eligible for, this is not a person who's thinking, I'm in a situation that I don't want to be in 2 years from now. This is a person who is, I just want to get by to the end of this month. Does that make sense? But this is it can be an extremely emotional situation. I actually was trained to be a navigator to understand what this is. And the kind of questions that you can get into, you also get people that have a lot of resiliency. You have a lot of, how do I say, willingness to do better, but they are in a situation of emergency right now. And I think that a lot of the false positives are people that we identify as having a lot of willingness and motivation, but they may not be too ready because they don't have the bandwidth to start thinking in terms of long-term improvement. They're just trying to get day by day. Does that make sense? But now let's say that you're truly ready, and then let's say what I really need is I need to get into this program. But let's say I'm going to make up an example, and the program is I want to train to be a welder, but this is a night course, and I am a single mom. I need an agency I need a childcare program who serves parents, who provides care during non-standard hours. And then the United Way actually tries to find an agency that would be willing and capable of taking that child. And then there might be actually funding that the United Way provides to the childcare program, so that person can actually attend school at night and have the child being taken care at night. Does that make sense? So that's what the program is. What they're trying to do is to remove barriers for people to engage in workforce training. And for one person, it might be childcare. For another person, it might be, like a transportation. I need to figure out how to go to this point A to point B every day so that I can take classes. So that's the way it works. So it's highly individualized. So it's not a one size fits all type of program. It really is where do you want to go? What are the steps that we need to follow for you to get there? And what are the constraints that you face right now in order for you to do step 1 and step 2 and step 3 and step 4? Someone can be in the United Way. You have goals along the ways. It may be that the final goal, the ultimate goal is I'm going to become a welder in 2 years. But the goals might be goal number 1, I find childcare for my child. Goal number 2, I actually complete the first semester of this program, and so on and so forth. Does that make sense? So we have really rich data in terms of describing what the barriers are. We have data on all the goals that are determined, and we know whether they are reaching the goals or not reaching those goals. So that's part of the data that United Way has shared with us. But what we don't have are actually outcome data for the ones that have gone through the program or not. So that we don't have.
Thanks for providing that information. I guess, 2 follow-up questions.
Yeah.
Of the people who are determined ready,
Yes.
how many of those enter like a community college or a technical or some kind of educational institution?
I would say that the majority of them would go into more than 50% for sure going to community college. You may have some who what they're doing is they're doing some form of workforce training, but not necessarily through a community college program. So, for example, construction unions in Houston, some of them actually have training programs if you want to go into construction, and maybe some of these but I'll say it's not part of a community college. That does not mean that they don't have a curriculum, that they don't have like a well-established training program that leads to certificates that are recognized by that industry. But United Way is trying to actually encourage individuals to high return type of training programs, if that makes sense.
No, I think it's a really interesting proposal, and it seems as if it could lend really important insights for United Way, like trying to figure out like what kind of criteria should you use to determine eligibility. But I'm trying to think of like the kinds of insights that your project could lend to, let's say, community colleges or the
Yes, thank you for that question. Super
So I don't know
important
if you can
question.
expand on that.
Yes, I could, because I think that one of the things that we don't know is that we don't know why people, I don't want to be unfair to community colleges. Please don't take this as any statement about what they're doing. But sometimes the graduation rate in community colleges can be quite low. And I think that part of the problem is because we don't understand the constraints that people who tend to enroll in in community colleges, particularly the ones that are non-traditional students, are, and what are the barriers that they face. I think that this is going to go exactly on that scenario, answering exactly that question. I should have, in retrospect, I should have said a little bit more about this, because what United Way is trying to do is trying to identify exactly what these barriers are. But in principle, those barriers need not be addressed by United Way. They could be addressed by by community colleges themselves, by not-for-profit organizations, and so on and so forth. Although I don't know the extent to which community colleges do have the resources to address some of these barriers, right? So that's why I say a lot of the none of the individuals that are going through this program would be considered standard students, in the sense that they're not like the child. They most of these guys are leading households. They are main earners for the households, and so they're non-traditional students in that sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, this has been really helpful detail, I think, because this just leads to some of my questions that
I'm sorry.
No, this is really helpful, but this is in kind of getting at my overall question about this too, is helping us make that connection to how this
Yes.
program and what pieces of this program could be applied
Yes.
when we have these
Yes.
conversations. So I do think that it would be really beneficial to have in the proposal, so we can it can be more explicitly stated.
Melissa, Holly, thank you for bringing these points. It's how do I say? Sometimes you get lost into the minutia of the details, and you don't see the larger point. But there is obviously I think that what I don't see is a lot of coordination in social services. I think that this is trying to actually close that gap. I think that in retrospect, figuring placing so much emphasis on United Way of Greater Houston is not helpful to address, to make this larger point. And I agree. I'm happy to revise the proposal and take this bigger point. And I thank you for raising this, because it brings me back to a not so narrow view. So thank you.
No, I appreciate that. And I mean, it's obviously very important work, but for the ERC in particular, we just want to be able to document
Sure.
why the specific questions could benefit, and and you're able to answer those questions very easily. But I think having them written out would be really.
Melissa, if there's going to be some I just had a couple additions about the data.
Mhm.
Okay.
And you guys probably, UG probably caught this too. You're requesting CBM 001. You probably want to see CBM OC1, and same with the OOS and the OCS. They
So
didn't
could
have
you
that.
repeat, please? Ma'am, could you repeat, please? I'm taking notes.
Oh, yes. Okay. So you requested CBM 001, but there's
Okay.
now a CBM OC1.
Oh, okay.
And then you requested CBM OOS, and there's now a CBM OCS.
Okay.
And then the other thing I thought might help would be the transfer data, CBM OOT. I thought that would kind of help you see how
Okay.
people are tracking through all this.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, because people can actually move while they are part of the program, and they would move from one location to another location.
Right. Okay.
I don't know if the transfer, I mean, the T is just reporting what courses did not transfer, but to track actual transfer, you can do that through the enrollment, but just noting that the T is specifically about credits that don't transfer.
But whether they lost them or not would be another issue, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then FERPA exceptions too. I recognize that. Sorry, Celeste, I probably cut you off.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. So you listed research, but we see that many of the ERC proposals can be justified using studies or audit or evaluation justification. So I recommend maybe updating to studies and then specify how this program will improve instruction, and then really how you describe, I think that fits correctly, that, just making a clear connection to the use of the ERC data, I think that will be really helpful.
Thank you. I'm happy to do that. I feel horrible that I have this title now, but apologies.
No, it's good conversation.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, so I have pulling together what we've discussed. And again, I think your answers are there. It's clear as we're talking about it. So just getting this into the proposal is what we need. So first is being more specific about the elements of the program and how you being able to analyze those specific parts of what's happening in the program could apply to specific policy discussions, especially in education. And then I have a note about updating the FERPA statement about why this qualifies for access to student level data. And then a note about adding the OC1, the CBM OC1, the CBM OCS, and possibly the CBM OOT, maybe if, I'm not sure if that's useful, but you can look at it and consider.
Yeah.
That's what I have.
I'm happy to do that. Thank you.
Yeah. So looking at the lawyer and learn, what is for the next step is what I guess the board too is the next step you think to deny as submitted and then reread it next meeting and just have a new proposal or that thoughts from the board, discussion from the board about that way of moving forward.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because we still want to see it again, then we'll read it.
Yeah.
Appreciate the conversation a lot. Okay. So do I have a motion to? All right. I'm looking at mine. Okay. Do I have a motion to decline as submitted?
This is Rayon. I move.
Right. Do I have a second?
I'll second, Yuji.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Again, really appreciate the conversation and
Thank you. No, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Moving on to proposal 3, including remote access requirements UH 130, evaluating the implementation of Pipeline to Leadership Strategic Staffing Initiative and high quality instructional materials. You have a researcher here to talk about this one?
Yes, hello.
Hi, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for considering our proposal. This project evaluates the Pipeline to Leadership Strategic Staffing Initiative, or P2L, and the implementation of high-quality instructional materials, or HQIM, in Texas districts. P2L represents a major state investment in redesigning how schools deploy and support teachers. The model expands teacher leadership roles, provides job-embedded coaching, and aligns staffing structures with the implementation of HQIM. We have 3 core questions. How are districts implementing P2L and HQIM in practice? And what organizational or contextual factors shape that implementation? Because strategic staffing models require schools to rethink teacher roles, schedules, and supports, understanding implementation is essential for explaining variation in outcomes. Second, what impact does P2L have on student outcomes, including academic achievement, attendance, and discipline? One goal of the initiative is to expand access to effective teaching by redesigning roles so that more students have access to highly effective educators. Third, how does P2L influence teacher outcomes, including retention, advancement into leadership roles, certification pathways, and effectiveness as measured through student achievement and TIA designations? The standard ERC data requested allows us to examine each of these outcomes as stated, and we have also requested to link supplemental data provided by districts with more details, such as teacher-coach pairings and survey responses from teachers regarding their practices. Eventually, we know TEA is planning to collect data on things like mentor-coach pairings, but linking data provided by the P2L districts allows us to examine outcomes of the model in more detail more quickly. We have also requested supplemental data provided by TEA on current EPP enrollments to give us a more detailed look on patterns of enrollment of staff in districts who are seeking certification. Supporting district EPP partnerships and enrollment and completion of high-quality certification is a core component of the P2L model. To address the research questions, we'll combine use of fixed effects models along with the synthetic control method. I'm happy to discuss those approaches in more detail if board members have questions. From a policy perspective, this study is particularly timely. Texas has invested heavily in initiatives intended to strengthen the teacher workforce, including TIA, strategic staffing grants, and the new prep allotment. Yet we know relatively little about how staffing reforms interact with curriculum reforms and whether they improve teacher retention and student outcomes at scale. With ERC data, this project will provide the first evaluation of P2L and HQIM and compare outcomes to those from other strategic staffing initiatives. This will inform participating and future P2L district leaders, the TEA, and policymakers about how strategic staffing models can strengthen the teacher workforce and expand access to high-quality instruction. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board?
I was just curious about supplemental data. I didn't know if the supplemental data needed to have a data dictionary.
Yeah, that's on our note as well. So it looks like this research will use 3 different sets of supplemental data, but we, yeah, the new procedure requires all the proposals to submit the data dictionary using the template. So, I mean, can this study be started without the supplemental data, or would this proposal need to just come back to the future meetings?
No, that's a great question. Yeah, we are happy to put together a data dictionary and submit like an additional data request, I think would be the process, because we can definitely get started in evaluating some of the core components just using the existing data.
That's great.
Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
Not of you, Jacob, but of the coordinating board. If the supplemental data is at the aggregate level, are researchers still required to submit a supplemental data dictionary?
Yes.
Okay. And what if that data dictionary, what if that data is publicly available?
I think still.
Okay.
We have experienced a few cases where even publicly available data included sensitive information when when researchers merged that with the ERC data. So in order for us to make, or not determination, but just review it, we thought it would be helpful for the board members to see, even if the supplemental data is publicly available or aggregate or individual. Yeah.
Okay, thank you
for the question. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments for the researcher? If there are no other questions, I don't think it needs to be approved with an amendment, because we'll just come back with the data amendment. Does that sound right? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve, Celeste.
Have a second?
This is Megan. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thanks for being here.
Thank y'all.
All right. Proposal 4, including remote access request UH 131, effective institutional childcare on the educational attainment of student parents.
Hi.
Hi,
Yeah, this
welcome.
is mine. Thank you guys for taking the time to review my proposal. In a nutshell, I'm studying whether better access to childcare, especially on-campus childcare services, helps student parents stay enrolled, finish degrees, and ultimately then do better in the workforce. Student parents are a very sizable but relatively understudied group in higher education, and childcare is one of the biggest practical barriers that they face when attempting to complete a degree. I'm centered on looking at three main questions. First, who are student parents in Texas higher education, and how do their college and workforce outcomes compare to students without children? Second, when childcare access expands, do we see changes in enrollment, persistence, and degree completion for these student parents? And then third, do these supports show up later in positive effects on employment and earnings outcomes? The ERC data is essential to looking at these questions because they allow me to identify student parents and follow individuals longitudinally over time across enrollment, persistence, graduation, and then labor market outcomes by linking post-secondary records with K-12 backgrounds and then earnings. The results from this project can inform whether expanding childcare access through institutional childcare investments will meaningfully advance Texas's goals around higher completion for non-traditional students and stronger earnings for their graduates. This also provides evidence relevant to the recent Texas legislation, which centered around supporting pregnant and parenting students, helping institutions and the state better understand this population.
Great, thank you. Are there questions or comments from the board for the research? I think you mentioned data for openings and closings of non-centers. Is that included in the supplemental data or?
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. I actually have 2 points here. So first, from the TCECB data, I believe institutionally there's reported data on whether there is a child care center. But separately, there's a federal grant, the Child Care Access Means Parents in School grant, through which institutions of higher education can receive funding. And I wanted to use that as an exogenous way to look at increases in funding for childcare centers or openings or closings of childcare centers, because this is data at the institution level, so it's aggregate and it's publicly available. I had mistakenly been under the impression that it didn't need an additional supplemental data request, so I hadn't put that data dictionary together. Obviously, in the last proposal, I realized that was an incorrect assumption, but
she's being nice.
it's-
That was my assumption. Catherine's taking responsibility for something that's mine. My fault.
I mean, okay.
Not
I mean,
hers.
in this, yeah, can be added. So
yeah, that it can be added at a later date. Work can be started on many other questions without that. But yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah. And then one more thing. I mean, Angie, I'm going to put you on the spot because the proposal, I think I recognized the researcher requesting county unemployment levels from TWC data.
I didn't see that one in this one. I have it in 3 other proposals. Yeah, if it is in this one, yeah, just kind of my blanket statement. You can't use any of the geographic data in the wage files. It's not accurate.
Understood. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
thank you
okay.
for catching that. Yeah, I didn't catch that in this one.
Any other questions or comments for the researcher? I also want to make a statement for all the researchers, I guess.
So approval of the proposal doesn't entail approval of all the data elements in the supplemental data, regardless of data being public, aggregate, or individual level. I just want to make that clear.
So it will still, I think, point is it still goes through a legal review at the agencies additionally, but yeah. Yeah. Any other questions or comments for the researcher? And for this one, would this be an additional data request or is this an amendment? Additional data. Okay, so for this, I think, if there are no other questions or comments, do I have a motion to approve?
This is Holly. I motion to approve.
And I'll second Eugene.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Proposal 5, including remote access request UH-132, effective AI technology on college major choices and switching behavior.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for reviewing the proposal. This project intends to study the effect of the arrival of the AI models on college major choices amongst the students in Texas. And in particular, I looked at the publicly available enrollment data in the THECB dashboard, where I did my preliminary analysis, and I have included that in my research proposal. And I find that there are significant changes in the enrollment trends across different majors. And in particular, there has been about a 22% increase in enrollment in, say, mechanical engineering. And so in general, it's not about increase in the level that more students are getting enrolled, but it's about a compositional shift. And therefore, one is seeing changes in enrollment shares. But in order to make more clarity about like a causal effect of AI on major choice, one would need to actually look at the major choice of students because it's a sequential decision. And so for that, I would need individual data. So there are two research questions here. One is, what is the causal effect of AI shock on major choices? And in order to do that, I would use a Texas level policy that mandates students to have a degree plan when they reach around 30 credit hour. And so that gives a natural kind of a wedge where I can compare cohorts that were exposed to AI and that weren't exposed to AI to see how their choices are changing around that region. And so that can be a good way to identify a causal effect. The second is about how the different institutional policies in the four-year public universities affect switching behavior of students. So if someone wants to decide to change majors, that depends on a lot of eligibility rules that varies across university in terms of credit hour, GPA requirements, etc. And so what is the cost of these policies in terms of in student outcomes when especially they face an uncertain environment in terms of from the labor market and the kinds of skills they want to invest in? And so I believe the second part would require a modeling where we would want to also get insights into the counterfactual policies that these universities could perhaps adopt and get insights from in order to further their policies in a world where there would be AI. And there would be a lot of students who would want to change their majors, especially because the entry barriers to different majors, which were perhaps earlier higher and disparate among several majors, are now changing. And so I think that this is a project that would really help the instruction part of the higher education in general in Texas. And in order to study these, one would really require the higher education journey of students across cohorts, which is why I'm actually asking for the individual data spanning from grade 9 up till just like through the higher education and once they reach the initial job market. That's why I don't require all of the job data, just the recent once they graduate. So happy to answer any questions that you.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board for the research?
Yeah, I just want to point out what I had just said that you'd asked for, I think, Employment County. but none of the geographic data in the wage files are
Sure.
correct.
I got that. I got that when
Yeah.
you're speaking to the previous candidate.
Yeah,
Thank you so
I
much.
always
Yeah.
like to make that very clear.
No, thank you so much. Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
I just want to say this is timely.
Yeah.
I appreciate this. I mean, I think, institutions and policymakers are trying to kind of figure out like what is the impact on AI on the workforce and college pathways. So
Right.
I appreciate you, focusing on this issue.
Yeah, and also Texas, I think, has it's a nice setting because it is a host to a large number of good universities and students in general. But it's also one of those states in US which has a high tech sector. So the exposure to AI could be much larger for the students than maybe another state. So I just thought that this is the best laboratory to study this question.
I also agree that, I mean, this topic is super interesting. And then, well, I have a note to make related
Sure.
to the data sets that you're requesting. I was
Yeah.
hoping that you could maybe just state the exact data set names instead of just
Right.
putting enrollment
Yeah.
file
Yeah.
or
Yes.
So
So
that will
I would like to make a point there. So I actually had made a detailed Excel file on that, and I had sent to Kathy, but it's just that it was later than the deadline, and so it couldn't be really incorporated in this board meeting today. But I have made that, like, which has the files, the year for each files, and the reason why I'm requesting that file.
That's perfect. That's perfect. And that can be an amendment.
And
Yes.
and that's a mistake on my part, and I can share it with you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Not, do I have a motion to approve with the amendment to add the data table?
Yeah, this is Angie. I move to approve with the amendment.
This is Jackie. I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you so much.
All right, so proposal 6, including remote access request UTD 247, the effects of private tutoring centers on student outcomes.
All right.
Hi.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thanks. Thanks for the opportunity to present my project. So this project looks at how access to private commercial tutoring centers affects student outcomes in Texas. So the private tutoring has expanded quickly in the US, and more families are using it to support their children's learning. Over the past 25 years, the number of tutoring centers has increased from about like 4,000 to more than 12,000 in the US, and about 10% of them are located in Texas. But despite this rapid growth, we know very little about whether increased access to tutoring actually improves student outcomes, and whether it ends up increasing or reducing the existing achievement gaps. So what I study in this paper is basically what happens to student outcomes when a tutoring center opens in a local community. And the project focuses on 3 questions that I think are especially relevant for policymakers in Texas. So first, when a tutoring center opens nearby, do we see improvements in K-12 outcomes like standardized test scores, advanced course taking, and SAT or ACT performance? And second, do any of these short-term gains translate into longer-term benefits, such as like high school graduation, college enrollment, financial aid, participation, college completion, and early career earnings? And finally, who actually benefits from this increased access to tutoring? Are the effects similar across racial and socioeconomic groups, or are the gains mostly concentrated on students who are already high performing? And one can imagine that these tutoring centers might help students who are falling behind to catch up, but they could also give already high performing students an additional advantage and increase the achievement gaps. So the ERC data are essential to answering these questions. And I think this matters for Texas because, as I mentioned, that private tutoring has become a large part of how family supports their children's education, yet there's little evidence on how it affects students in the state. And the findings from this project can help Texas policymakers better understand whether private tutoring expands opportunities for students and whether those benefits are shared broadly. So if private tutoring is found to improve student outcomes, the results could support policies such as like private tutoring vouchers and could also highlight effective tutoring practices that public schools may be able to adopt themselves. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board for the researcher? I was hoping you could talk a little more about kind of that specific link to how policymakers could use what you're finding here. So especially around considering, we're looking at the number of private tutoring centers in an area, how close they are to the school. But my assumption is that these centers might do things differently. There might be varying quality to what they offer, and they might have different methods of supplemental instruction. So just wondered what you thought about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So first, I think in general, if I find that these private tutoring centers are effective in improving student outcomes, we can always look at, what types of private tutoring centers these are. I could observe in the data like what, the names of the private tutoring centers, so that could potentially help us in understanding, what kind of specific procedures that they're employing that are essentially that are more helpful. And I can also identify if these tutoring centers are, more beneficial to certain types of students, those who are, lower performing or those like of certain race. And that could also inform, I think, Texas about what types of policies could be implemented. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, that's helpful. Any other questions or comments from the board? Is this one we would like a data dictionary from eventually, like if we can move forward today, but
yes,
that data dictionary for the supplemental data. Right, if there are no other questions or comments, do I have a motion to approve?
This is Kathy. I'll move to approve.
Have a second?
Celeste, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, proposal 7, including remote access request UTD 248. The impact of policy-driven kindergarten retention on long-run outcomes in Texas. Any questions or comments on this? Oh, presentation. Sorry. Is there so much to present? I'm so sorry. Someone here to present on this.
Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
All right, so my name is Dareem, and I'm a third-year economics student at UTD. And I am also a research assistant with the Texas Schools Project. I'll be working on this project with my advisor, Dr. Miller, as well as Dr. Ben Higgins and Samia Seth. This is a partnership between the Texas Schools Project and the Commit Partnership. And naturally, it's my hope that this project will be a part of my dissertation as well. To give some context to this, so we are aware that early academic skill gaps exist and they emerge before a student formally enters their formal schooling time. And they also persist throughout the K through 12 pipeline. Just to give some deeper understanding there, in Texas, fewer than about half students begin kindergarten academically ready, and these readiness gaps are particularly larger among groups of students that are historically disadvantaged, or even coming from historically marginalized groups. These early disparities, they matter because students who begin behind rarely fully catch up, even when remediation is provided by schools later on. Despite these important considerations of academic foundations, kindergarten placement is largely, or these decisions in Texas are based on age, chronological age, rather than measured by readiness. And districts vary in how they respond when students enter schools when they're not prepared. And we also know that there are practices that exist like delayed entry into kindergarten, which which may exist for different reasons, but also that differs across school and student population contexts. So in this study, we examine how kindergarten readiness, retention, and early grade placement interact in the Texas public school setting, using the longitudinal administrative data from TEA, as well as including the early childhood education data system, readiness assessments linked to student enrollment data, and outcome records for these students. We want to document statewide patterns in how outcomes differ, like later achievement, attendance, disciplinary incidents, how they differ between students who are retained and promoted, conditional on their measured readiness at school entry. This conversation is particularly important in Texas at this time because we hope that by documenting these patterns, we would be able to provide policymakers with a clear picture of how early grade placement decisions currently operate within the state, particularly as the legislator has continued to prioritize early childhood education investments. Recently, we have seen that the legislature has expanded investments in early childhood care and learning, including additional state funding for childcare services and proposal to expand access to pre-kindergarten. And additionally, we have seen the formation of the governor's task force on early childhood education as well, that was established to examine access, the effectiveness, as well as the structure of early childhood programs statewide. So we hope that evidence from this proposed project can help inform these ongoing discussions about how key placement decisions in the early grades will align with the state's goal of strengthening early learning across the state. And with that, I'd like to say thank you for your time, and I'd like to see if you have any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board and the researcher? Yeah, I thought it was really clear and well connected, so appreciate the thought into that. So if there are no questions or comments, do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve. Celeste.
This is Megan. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thanks
Thank
for
you
being
all.
here. All right, proposal 8, including remote access request UTD 249, peer effects on and off field.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm Jamie. I have a couple of my collaborators on the call too. We're happy to take questions as they come up. But at a high level, our goal in this project is to study this idea of peer effects and the idea that the degree to which students' friendships, particularly between students from kind of high and low income families, matter both for their educational and economic outcomes in the long run. And in this project, I think we're really motivated kind of in two parts. First, from kind of, I think, a growing emphasis in Texas policy on this idea that cross-class connections might matter, as well as supporting evidence from recent research in economics showing the importance of these connections. Excuse me. And so in Texas, I think you can think of many different policy examples that are related to these issues. So several school districts have programs whose goal, I think at least in part, is economic integration. For example, in Dallas, there's a network of choice and magnet schools intended to keep high income students in public schools and thereby increase this cross-class exposure and potentially form these cross-class friendships. At a different end of the spectrum, you can think of other types of focused initiatives like ninth grade academies, focusing on kind of organizing these small, stable peer groups to try to foster connections across class. And I think these policies are really well motivated by research in economics showing that cross-class friendships are some of the strongest predictors of upward mobility in the US. I think one challenge in that research is, for the most part, it's been really correlational. We still don't know that if you could form a friendship between two possible peers, whether encouraging them to do so might actually causally improve their economic well-being. And of course, friendships is a setting where it's really hard to have what we might think of as kind of random variation. We can't run an experiment where we just get different people to be friends with each other. And so our goal in this project is to leverage something that we think is as close to that as possible, which is the role of your high school sports teammates. This is a huge peer group for many students, and particularly in Texas, where about 50% of students play sports in high school. And due to constraints on the size of teams, there is a degree of variation in terms of who makes which team that we think is totally unrelated to students' characteristics otherwise, and provides kind of this ideal setting for trying to understand what the long-term effects of these friendships are. So our goal in this project, as we've described in the proposal, is to bring in data that we have on sports team rosters in Texas, link this to the ERC data, and I think that will allow us to answer a range of descriptive and causal questions about peer effects in sports. We can ask things like, do students who share a team go on to have similar outcomes in early adulthood? Do they go to similar colleges? Do they work in similar industries? Things like this. I think there's a host of questions we can answer with these data, and we're really excited about the prospect of doing so. So I'll leave time for your guys' questions and happy to answer anything we can.
Great, thank you. Questions or comments from the board for the researchers? I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how, I'm assuming a lot of this will be pretty small numbers in some cases. So in thinking about how to handle the small n sometimes that you're seeing, or with the little data you're adding. Yeah.
So you mean in terms of kind of reporting statistics that we would produce in the research, or?
Yeah, is the disaggregation happening at many levels, or, by peer group, but also school?
So I think our goal will not be to, release any statistics about particular teams or particular schools or anything like this. I think the intuition you should have in mind is like a thought experiment where we could say, like, there are two students, they might play football, they might play basketball. Because of extra spots on the basketball team this year, they're pushed into this direction. Are their outcomes more similar to their peers on the basketball team relative to their kind of counterfactual peers on the football team? We wouldn't say that for any two students, but you could say, comparing any two teams on average, how is this correlation stronger among people who actually share a team? And so I think you're completely right that any kind of small group would be small, but I think in principle, like the regression coefficients that we would release would be estimated on millions of students as opposed to any small groups, which I think helps alleviate some of those concerns. But that's a great question.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments from the board? There are none. Do I have a motion to approve?
This is Angie. I'll move to approve.
Do I have a second?
This is Holly, I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Just a quick note, I know one of the researchers is out of the country and remote access can't happen.
Yep.
Outside.
Totally.
But,
yes. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
All right, proposal 9, including remote access requests, UTD 250. teacher shortages, relative pay, and college access evidence from Texas.
Hi. Yeah, so the project is really trying to understand the relationship between teacher shortages, relative pay, and college access. And I'll say the last time I was at one of these meetings was almost 20 years ago, so it's good to be back. And thank you for taking the time to hear the proposal today. So the motivation for the project is basically the fact that Texas schools, like many other states, are facing a growing challenge, which is to make sure that every classroom has a qualified teacher. So in Texas in particular, districts are increasingly relying on uncertified teachers. And this trend has really happened during a period when there's declining teacher pay once you account for inflation, and also a strong labor market that is providing attractive alternatives outside of teaching. So, obviously policymakers have noticed this and they've responded to this challenge. In particular, House Bill 2 proposes significant reforms to teacher compensation, and in the State of the State given by the governor in 2025, it was emphasized that we want to sort of expand the teacher pipeline. But I think questions still remain, which is, which policies actually work to strengthen the teacher workforce. So the project that we're proposing really involves three parts that are designed to hopefully shed some light on these issues. So the first part of that is largely descriptive, and we hope to document how teacher pay, teacher qualifications, and career paths vary across districts. By linking teacher records to the broader labor market data, we'll hope to examine how compensation, both inside and outside of teaching, affects who enters the profession and who leaves. We'll also hope to estimate the relationship between teacher characteristics and student performance to gauge how much of these observed changes that we observe may affect student achievement. This hopefully is going to provide policymakers with a clear picture of teacher relative pay and how Texas labor market conditions may shape the teacher pipeline. The second part of the project is sort of follows up on that, and we hope to sort of evaluate specific teacher pay reforms that are already underway in Texas. So some district initiatives such as Austin's Professional Pathways for Teachers and other district level compensation changes are going to provide sort of natural experiments for us to exploit. Using these policy changes, we hope to estimate whether higher or differently structured pay attracts and retains effective teachers as measured by their characteristics while in high school. These results will help inform statewide reforms such as House Bill 2 by identifying which compensation strategies are most effective at attracting and retaining teachers into the state. The third part of the project is really thinking more about pipeline, and we want to examine how Texas college admission policies affect long-run teacher pipeline. So policies such as the top 10% rule, expanded access to selective universities like UT Austin, and this was particularly true for students from rural and historically underserved communities. And because teachers tend to return to work in communities similar to where they grew up, these policies may have changed both the number and the geographic distribution of future teachers. So we hope to examine whether these admission policies increase the supply of teachers, especially for rural and high poverty schools. So the Texas data is uniquely positioned for this analysis because the administrative data links students from K through 12 schooling all the way through college and into the workforce. This is going to potentially allow us to track who becomes a teacher and how effective they are in the classroom. It also is going to allow us to track labor market outcomes for those who, not only those who become teachers, but also those who choose not to become teachers, which is important for figuring out what the outside options may be. So the goal of the project really is to provide actionable evidence for Texas policymakers by sort of examining the relationships between teacher relative pay and teacher qualifications, evaluating compensation reforms such as Austin's PPFT, and examining statewide admissions policies such as the top 10% rule. And the hope is that this research will help identify the kinds of policies that are going to be most effective at strengthening the teacher workforce and ensuring that students have access to high quality teachers. And I just say this is something that is a nationwide challenge, but I think the issues are very pressing in Texas specifically. And I'm happy to take your questions.
Great, thank you. Questions or comments from the board for the researchers?
Just a comment that I really appreciate the novelty of looking at the admissions policy relationship to return to geography and teaching. I think that, yeah, I'll be interested to see what you learn from that.
Thank you so much for that.
Any other questions or comments? I think this one too, I know you're merging in aggregate level, but if you could submit the data dictionary for us to have in the record and then for the board to review.
Yes, I did note in the previous ones that was flagged as well. Thank you for that. We will do that.
Okay. There are no other questions or comments. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve, Celeste.
This is Jackie, a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right, proposal 10, including remote access requests, UTD 251, the effect of violence on teacher attrition in Texas.
Hi,
Research. Hi.
hello,
Welcome.
everyone. And thanks to the board for letting me present my proposal. And as the title implies, this research tries to understand what's the effect of violence on teacher attrition in Texas state. So to give you a little bit of background, we know that teacher attrition remains a significant challenge for Texas public schools, and it raises ongoing concerns regarding staffing shortages and instability. In recent years, for example, more than 12% of teachers have left the classroom annually, and these rates are even higher in schools that serve disadvantaged communities. The problem is that when teachers leave the classrooms, students lose stability, districts face expenses for recruitment and training, and of course, schools tend to rely more heavily on inexperienced or non-certified teachers. At the same time, Texas has made significant investments in the school safety, including increased funding and new campuses requirements safety. However, the evidence linking violence to teachers' decisions, such as leaving the profession or transferring between the schools, is still limited. So in this context, this project is designed to answer at least 3 policy-relevant questions. First, when exposure to violence increases inside the classrooms, are teachers more likely to leave the Texas public school system? Second, even if teachers do not leave the profession entirely, are they more likely to move from higher violence to lower violence schools? In other words, does violence lead to an unequal redistribution or allocation of teachers across the schools? And third, what happened to the students? Are students become more likely to be taught by inexperienced or non-certified teachers? And how does this affect academic outcomes or student trajectories? Of course, to answer all of these questions, access to ERC data is essential because basically this analysis requires linking teacher employment stories to school disciplinary records, student outcomes, and also district characteristics over time. And of course, these longitudinal connections are not possible using public available data. So I think the findings of this research will inform Texas education policy, especially House Bill 2 and House Bill 3, that are about how safety investments can be associated with a stronger workforce stability, or whether if these investments in safety and security requirements on campuses can be effective to retain teachers and help students. Thank you so much, and I will be happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board for the researcher? I think you mentioned you're looking into the degree information as your outcomes, and I see that CBM 009 was not listed. So if you want to look at the degree information or graduation information, you would like to probably add that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I will note that.
And then data dictionary too for the next additional data request.
Yeah.
I have a question again about kind of helping specifically link what you're researching in this project and how it can be discussed for the possible policy improvements. So you do mention this could possibly inform discussions of policies about school resource officers, other security measures in the schools, but I am not as familiar with the TA data as I am the higher ed data, but is that information that's available in the data? Like, is there any way to see something about those current policies in the schools now?
Yeah.
Or okay.
Yeah, there are some staff variables that can be used to understand if there is, for example, more investment in a specific safe personnel or staff inside the classrooms. But of course, these bills have been discussed in the last year, so maybe it's not going to be enough time to understand what has been the impacts of that. But of course, it's something that I will take into account when I discuss the results of my research.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
All right. I have not about Shirley, but about supplemental data. So I am sorry if you stated this and I missed it, but I did not know that we had to submit supplemental data dictionaries for those proposals that are emerging in aggregate level data. And so I'm trying to understand what the protocol is. Do the researchers need to submit an additional data request, or can I just submit the data dictionary like in a follow-up email and then we would be good to go?
Can we let you know after we can discuss and
Okay, perfect.
If that's okay.
Yep.
And Melissa, I'm hopping on as a +1 to Holly's wondering, just generally and then related to specific proposals from this round. That'd be helpful to know.
Me as well. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for the researcher? Are none, do I have a motion to approve with the amendment to add the request for the CBM 009?
This is Kathy. I'm going to approve.
I'll second. This is Celeste.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thanks for being here today. So proposal 11, including remote access request, UTA 286. Racial performance gaps in school age determinants of eventual criminal conviction. Do we have researchers here to talk about this one?
Hey guys, good to see you. I will be super brief, partially because this is actually a resurrection of an older project. It was previously UTA 155. It was approved in 2021. It was abandoned because we had some difficulties with the data, but we overcome those problems, and so we're back. This was approved in 2021 or something in fact, this is a streamlined version of what was approved, so I'll be super brief. As you can see from the titles, you can glean, we're interested in people who will ultimately, Texas public school students who will ultimately face criminal conviction, and many of them incarceration. This is about as bad of an outcome.
Sorry, before you continue,
Yeah,
not everyone on the board was here in 2021, so I don't want you to force yourself to be too brief because.
Yep, but I'm just going to give you a high level overview. That's about as bad of an outcome as one can experience. A conviction and incarceration outside of mortality and certain morbidities, it is as bad as it gets. And our basic research question is, who are these students? Can we predict these things? Are they the students with particularly low test scores? Are they sometimes students with high test scores? We know that race is going to be a key part of this for lots and lots and lots of reasons. So we're studying that at the same time. But are these students that have been facing disciplinary actions over and over over the course of their time in school are these students who are very rarely present at school. We're just trying, this is a largely descriptive project, and we just want to use the ERC to try to understand who is at risk of this pretty catastrophic outcome, not just for the individuals for whom it's happening, but for the crimes, the social costs of these crimes that are leading to these outcomes. Obviously the question is, conviction is not part of the ERC. We'll be linking that in externally. Others have done this, not just other researchers have done this, including ourselves in another project. And I'm happy to talk about that. But that is the high level, just trying to identify like who are these students and making better predictions about who needs help.
All right, thank you. Questions or comments from the board for the researcher?
Yes, this was another proposal. You asked for employment county data. But yeah, just to reiterate again, all of the geographic data in the wage files is inaccurate, so don't use any of that.
Noted.
And I understand this was brought in 2021 and there are other projects that do it, but I will say, this is possibly a different board, and I want to make sure people ask questions. So my overall question is, even some of what you were saying right now was more specific about what specific things could lead to, or the associations you're wanting to see if this leads to criminal convictions. I had a hard time connecting exactly how what you are looking at can be tied to specific policy discussions. So how can what you are finding specifically be brought into those discussions that could affect boots on the ground?
So I think there's sort of an evergreen discussion of crime, right? And like what causes it and what can we do about it? That's something that exists in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of talk about something like a school to prison pipeline of like, okay, there is like an observable like set of things that is transpiring over the course of these students' lives. And I don't think that the literature, as good as some of it is, gives us a particularly detailed view of that school to prison pipeline and whether there's anything that we could do to change it. So if you were to ask a principal, a teacher, any kind of school administrators, like would they like to be able to predict, would they like to have some guess as to which students of theirs would ultimately end up in a prison cell? I think that there's a ton of interest in that. I'm not listing specific state level policies at this time, but I'm happy to provide those to you as part of an update to the proposal if that would be useful. But I think this is part of an evergreen discussion of the school to prison pipeline.
Yeah. I understand the interest in the topic, but just specifically for using educational data in Texas and linking it to something so, very sensitive information, why, what could come out of this research specifically that would improve? And you're right, what I didn't see in the proposal is here's the variables that we can look at that we're considering that can specifically go into this topic of policy. So not just are there differences, but like how can specifically what you're doing here lead to specific questions of policy? So kind of being explicit about the research and how it's tying to conversations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, we're just trying to provide like a broad set of descriptive facts that researchers and policymakers can use as they see fit. So
I understand that, but for ERC research, it's a requirement that it's very clear what the benefit to Texas is, and I think those specific ties really need to be clear, especially for a topic like this where you're linking very sensitive information to educational information in particular. Yeah, and so I as we've written, so we have our benefits to Texas and related policies. I'll read that part for you because maybe that will give you a better idea. I have it in front of me. But I mean, I'll leave it open for other.
Sure.
Well, can I just want to add some 2 cents. I mean, this is something that I wrote in my notes as I was reviewing the proposal. Benefits to Texas section, you write that you would assess, which features of schools may reduce the likelihood of criminal outcomes. And I'm just wondering, can you expand on that? When you say features, what are you talking about?
Yeah, so one thing that we're really interested in is whether or not teachers, there's a large literature, it's like the teacher value add literature. There's probably several proposals at any given time working on teacher value add. And one of the things that we're interested in is having a good teacher. Yes, we understand that that can affect test scores in the short term. It can affect wages in the long term, employment in the long term. Are certain teachers, do they seem to be the difference between some students ultimately facing conviction and not? The actual staff of a place might be some mitigating factor that we're interested in, as an example.
So I would draw back. Sorry, Holly, did you want to add?
I mean, I'll let you go, Kathy.
I was just going to, I'm drawing back to earlier, not comparing earlier proposals, but just drawing back to conversation that feels parallel to me a little bit, of amplifying Melissa's point that having without argument about the, as you say, evergreen attention to this important topic and understanding it with deeper nuance and capacity. But the charge of this group is to understand, as Melissa articulated, in part, its explicit connection into contribution to ed policy. So even in Holly's question, which is a good one, right? Having a more explicated representation of some of that, I think, would be very helpful. Again, in full agreement about the importance of the work in substance. The proposal itself has space to strengthen and how it represents that importance tied specifically to Texas ed policy.
Okay. Yeah, we can clarify that in a subsequent draft if that sounds like the key concern.
Other questions or comments?
Yeah, I mean, just out of curiosity, the clarification basically would be just kind of rewriting benefits to Texas education and related
It's
policies. Is that correct?
even more than that. So the research questions, being clear about what elements of, so in the benefits to Texas, it does, I circled that too, educational factors that contribute. What are you looking at specifically? And that's part of a research question that then is tied to the data you're requesting, that's tied to a possible benefit. So I think that's where kind of the full thread needs to be clear.
Okay.
Or access to student level data to evaluate it.
I understand.
And that will be related to the FERPA justification too, I think. That yeah.
Yeah, again, I'm not arguing that this is an important topic. I think just for the charge of this specific.
No, I understand.
Board, yeah. Any other questions or comments? I'll note too, just as you're thinking about some of this, in the data dictionary, thanks for including all that detail. I think it was unclear to me why some of the details are needed for your research questions, like the very detailed information about what types of crime. So I think that's information that would be helpful.
Okay.
Again, with just thinking the sensitive nature of this topic tying to educational data, so helping us understand that. Any other questions or comments? Any thoughts from the board about way to move forward? Does this feel substantial enough to bring fresh to another meeting?
I mean, it's obviously up to you because you would be the one having to review, if it was just submitting some changes. So that's your decision, I think.
Well, also the board, if they feel comfortable with that. Just speak one person, but I mean, my suggestion is with this, I would assume the board would want to review it again. Thoughts?
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you, Rand. All right, then I will put forward ask if anyone will motion to decline as submitted. I'll look to approve. Yuji.
This is Jackie. I'll second.
You all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Looking forward to seeing you again. All right, so proposal 12, including remote access request UTA 287, the effects of standardized test requirements in college admissions, evidence from Texas. Do we have someone here to talk about this one?
Yes, hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here today. My name is Catherine Cohen, and my colleague Nat Chwanajan is here with me, and we're both really eager to have our project reviewed by this board. To give a bit of brief background on us, we're both third-year PhD students in the economics department here at UT Austin with a deep interest in education economics, and we're hopeful that this will be our first opportunity, hopefully of many, to work with the ERC data. As you can see here, the title of our project is The Effects of Standardized Test Requirements in College Admissions, Evidence from Texas. Our primary aim through this work is using Texas as a case study to understand the impact of so-called test optional admissions policies, or those where an SAT or ACT score is not required as part of the college application requirements on the decisions and outcomes of students when applying to college. To give a bit more context on the setting, in 2020, with the onset of COVID-19, colleges and universities throughout the country went test optional due to student inability to access testing centers. Here in Texas, all 35 of the public four-year colleges elected to go test optional at some point in time. Notably, these changes proved quite lasting, with to this day, roughly 80% of colleges and universities in the United States still not requiring SAT or ACT scores as part of their application criteria. Some colleges, including UT Austin, opted to return to SAT requirements with the rationale that standardized tests are a valuable tool for deciding who is admitted and placing students in majors that are ultimately the best fit for them. This reflects this long-standing debate about the merit of standardized tests in college admissions that existed long before COVID and has recently been revived. On the one hand, the tests are known to be highly correlated with income and may be just another measure that benefits students who can afford things like tutors and to take the test multiple times. On the other hand, the SAT or ACT can be viewed as a lifeline for high-achieving low-income students to signal their ability through a measure that has the potential to be more objective and can be taken in context more easily than other components of the college application portfolio. The scores are also highly predictive of college success, providing an important signal to colleges as to which students are likely to succeed. We believe that studying this pandemic shock to test requirements using the ERC data offers an opportunity to shed some light on the tension created by this theoretical ambiguity. The primary benefit of using the ERC data is that it will allow us to observe the impact of the SAT or ACT requirements on multiple decision margins, particularly those upstream of application. More concretely, what I mean by this is we'd be able to observe how relaxing the standardized test requirements change decisions and outcomes of students from whether or not to take the exam, the score that they achieved on the exam, whether to apply to a given college, whether to disclose their score to the college, admission decisions, and so on. Moreover, we believe that the scale of the ERC, covering roughly 10% of all public university students in the US, as well as the diversity of student backgrounds, will allow us to make claims that are broadly generalizable with ability to discern heterogeneity across different student attributes of interest. Methodologically, we hope to do a difference in differences design using the period each college went test optional as a treatment. The primary outcomes we're interested in are the student level application portfolio, SAT and ACT score reporting behavior, college acceptance rates, college enrollment, and outcomes in college and beyond. To establish a credible design, we need to have sufficient span of time periods pre-COVID to establish a control group, leading us to ask for cohorts entering college as early as 2010. We hope that this will give us sufficient power to detect the impact of test optional admissions and how the policy actually affected students in Texas. We also want to highlight that since submitting the original application, a data sharing agreement was approved by the ACT, enabling us to merge in all of the ACT scores to the files we'll receive from the TEA. To our understanding, this is in addition to the scores that we'll receive from the THECB, which will include only the scores that are disclosed as part of the application. Finally, it is our belief that this work will be valuable to the state of Texas because Texas has a large ecosystem of colleges and universities that could stand to benefit from understanding the implications of the presence or absence of standardized test requirements. Part of this is reflected in the match value. Colleges are often interested in finding the right students or those who will succeed in their environment. Our hope is that the results of this analysis will help colleges and universities in Texas and beyond understand the role of the SAT or ACT signal in forming this match. Moreover, higher education has a proven impact on intergenerational mobility, and colleges and universities often express interest in identifying qualified students who stand to benefit the most from admission. Again, here, the results of this study will be able to inform how colleges and universities shape their application criteria going forward to achieve these objectives. Thanks so much again for your time, and we look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Great, thank you. Questions or comments from the board?
Yes, just to point out again, you had asked for residence county and employment county and the wage data. And yeah, the geographic data and the wage can't be used.
Heard loud and clear. Thank you very much for clarifying again.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And as far as procedure, would this, like one of the previous ones, be a data amendment with now that she has approval for some of the ACT scores and a data dictionary, both?
Wouldn't this be a little difficult because I don't think there was a mention of supplemental data in the.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah. Not an amendment to this motion, but an
Yeah.
Right.
amendment at the next.
Yeah, data amendment.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Additional data request.
Additional data request.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like in the same vein has been discussed in repeated proposals. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you so much.
So at a future meeting, you'll bring the details of that supplemental data.
Okay.
So we can review. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Can I make one question?
Sure.
So
wait.
for the proposals.
1 second, sorry. I have to ask about procedure. This is another researcher asking a question.
Yeah, I'd say let's close this one out and then.
Okay, can you ask this after we close the current proposal out?
Yeah, no, just
We're in the middle of a. We're in the
I
middle
can
of.
make the question after everyone finished. Don't worry.
Yes, thank you. After we close this motion, everything up. Yeah, we'll open it. Sorry, 1 second.
You listed 2 FERPA exceptions, studies and audit or evaluations. But I thought this is more fitting into studies because you're not doing a formal evaluation. So because, for evaluation, I thought, if you're validating, let's say, psychometric performance of SAT or ACT, then I think evaluation FERPA justification might be more suitable. But for the purpose of your study, I think maybe removing that audit or evaluation justification, but leaving only the studies might be ideal.
Okay, I see.
agree.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. I'm by no means an expert in FERPA policy, so that is very helpful. Just to clarify, are you looking at on page 5, the paragraph starting with furthermore?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
And just for context related question, did all institutions go test optional that you're for the same test for the same time period that you can make the assumption? Because I imagine you'll probably bring in supplemental data for the list of higher education institutions that went test optional, which test, for how long, but I didn't see that. So I was just wondering how you're planning to identify that information for your study.
Yeah, so I think with the discussion of how to handle the publicly available information, I think this also fits into that with maybe we had a inaccurate understanding of the process. It's a pretty small number of universities, and it's pretty easy to just from Googling discern that information. So I think that like a combination of that, and then before anything is ultimately used, like validating with the universities themselves. But if that also feels like the type of thing that should go through the supplemental data request process, we are happy to do that as well.
And we can update after if that specific, but it's helpful to know that that would be included too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll basically just be indicators for, universities and years. But yeah.
Sorry, one more question. Why do you need the TA's contractors data?
The TEA's contractors data.
I thought employee and contractors data. And Linda, please chime in if I'm referring to wrong data set.
Oh yeah. P employee CONTR.
Sorry, I'm just trying to find that now.
Hi. Hi, I think we're trying to cover all like teachers and counselors and everything in the school at the school level. That's probably why we included that. But if it's already included in the normal employee, then I think it should be fine.
I think other board members can chime in, but when I read through the research questions, that's where I kind of start identifying the needed data sets. And then I don't think I saw that connection from the research proposal or the research questions of why. You mentioned counselors too, but I don't think I saw, I might have missed it, but I don't think I saw a clear connection to needing for the counselors or employees.
You guys said it's like 80% of what the aggregated. I think it's just like that. Like when it comes to college admission, sometimes school they have the counselor, they have experienced teachers, and we want to include that as a part of the school fixed effects. And like usually school fixed effect itself would be enough, but with the variation in time, it's kind of helpful to have extra information on what kind of personals, what kind of counselor, what kind of teachers that schools have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's helpful. You know that that's being included in a kind of a controller fixed effects. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments? I don't think there was. Oh, okay. So do I have a motion to approve with the amendment to update the FERPA statement?
This is Megan. I'll motion that we approve with an updated FERPA statement.
Have a second?
Oh, this is Holly. I second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. So I want to leave it open for questions. Question that came up earlier, now that we're closed out.
Shirley?
I just have a question regarding what does it imply to be approved with that amendment? Does it imply that we need to wait for the next board to receive the data, or how does it work?
Which proposal?
It was
All
the
the
last. UTD proposal that was considered?
That was number 10. Sorry.
Yes.
Go. How quickly things go out of my brain. So the amendment on that one was adding the 9. I think that was the only amendment. So I think to start your study, the only thing that happens is that was that correct? That was the only amendment? Yeah. So to start the study, that's the only amendment.
And then you'll work with Holly to provide that amended
the data dictionary. Yeah, I think, there's two things. Like an amendment right now is saying like what you have to do to start and be officially approved. And then if needed, we might need to see a additional data request for other data, but we can absolutely work with Holly to.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, and Charlotte, I'll just follow up with you via email. So
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. We are on proposal 13, including remote access request UTA 288, the geography of opportunity for Latino students in Texas.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, welcome.
Hey, good to see you all. As always, I must begin by thanking you all for considering our proposal. It's always a privilege to be able to have the opportunity to access the ERC data for our research. This study is being done hopefully with Dr. Robert Krosno and Yuhao Kang, both at UT Austin. Dr. Krosno is a sociologist and demographer in the College of Liberal Arts who has many years of studying Latino students, both in Texas and elsewhere, and has written many books on the subject. And Dr. Kang is a really amazing geographer who has some incredible methodological expertise for kind of characterizing the geographic conditions of communities and associating that with various outcomes. And together, we're putting this proposal forward to explore the geography of opportunity for Latino students in Texas. I'm sure I don't have to tell anyone on this call that Latino students make up the majority of K-12 students in the state of Texas, and that has been the case for over a decade. And yet the post-secondary outcomes of Latino students continue to lag behind their peers, most notably in comparison to white and Asian students. And yet there's still a lot to learn about the causes and consequences of those disparities in college outcomes. So this study proposes to look at 2 decades roughly of high school graduates from public schools in Texas, and to try to understand the patterns of post-secondary outcomes for Latino students and their peers, and some of the reasons why we see the disparities that we do. So the proposal has a number of phases. In the first phase, we'll really just try to paint a descriptive portrait of the post-secondary outcomes of Latino students, as well as other demographic groups. That will be mostly done with descriptive statistics or some very simple kind of statistical models to characterize trends and patterns in various college-going outcomes. The second part of the study will add in many factors that we might theorize are related to students' post-secondary outcomes and that prior literature suggests will be. And in particular, we're really examining the contexts and the community conditions and geographic characteristics that might shape student outcomes. Hence our collaboration with Dr. Kang, who has a lot of expertise in that area. So we propose to examine things like the labor market conditions, proximity between communities and higher education institutions, crime statistics, other measures of the community to try to examine the extent to which those factors explain post-secondary outcomes. We'll then use decomposition methods, which are essentially designed to explain inequalities in outcomes between groups. And those methods kind of decompose those inequalities into differences in levels of the variables in the model. So for example, inequalities in things like test scores, the rigor of the curriculum students complete in high school, or differences in their community characteristics, versus difference in the relationship between those variables and the outcomes. So for example, different variables might matter more for Latino students versus other students. And the decomposition methods will hopefully point the way towards some of the most salient factors in explaining inequalities in post-secondary outcomes between Latino students and others. And finally, this quantitative research is also poised to prepare us to do qualitative research in the future, which Dr. Krosno will likely lead. Essentially, once we've kind of finalized the statistical models that we think are best equipped to predict differences in students' post-secondary outcomes, we'll use those models to try to identify high schools that seem to be exceeding their predicted performance. So in other words, once we control for things like test scores, demographic backgrounds, the rigor of the curriculum students completed in high school, community characteristics, and so forth, which high schools seem to be exceeding their predictions in terms of helping students access and succeed in post-secondary education. And then we'll likely recruit those schools for site visits and qualitative research in the future, so we can learn more deeply what those schools are doing to really help Latino students succeed after high school. The couple other points I'll mention is that we do request to bring in some supplemental data, but it would not be student level. It would be from sources like the US Census Bureau, the Department of Education's EDGE program, which has demographic and geographic characteristics of all schools in the country, and so forth. And one final thing I'll note before I turn it over to y'all is that there's one sentence or two that was copy and pasted erroneously from a previous application that references JET data, which is Jobs and Education for Texans, one of the Texas Workforce Commission's programs that we're evaluating in a separate ERC proposal. That line should not have been in this proposal. That was just an error on my part. So we do not plan to bring any JET data into the ERC for this project. So yeah, with that, I'll turn it over to y'all.
Great, thank you. Questions or comments from the board? I'll ask kind of a similar question I've been asking all meeting is kind of asking for a little more detail in how exactly what you all are looking at in your models could be brought to discussions about policy, because I know a lot of it, you mentioned it is descriptive, or a lot of it is descriptive, but kind of how could we expect some of the things you're specifically going to be looking at? How could that aid in conversations about education policy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a few things come to mind. First, of course, we'll examine things like the rigor of the curriculum that students completed in high school and how that's associated with students' college outcomes and potential inequalities between groups. We might find that certain strategies are particularly beneficial for Latino students versus others. That could inform the kind of emphasis that we place on particular strategies to really ameliorate some of the inequalities in college outcomes that we see. Additionally, one question that we have, much research has examined the issue of things like education deserts, or the fact that the majority of students go to college close to home, right? So some policies might be more aimed at helping students leave their community to go to a quote unquote better college or a better matched college. But depending on what we find, that might have different implications for investments in the colleges that are within specific communities. If we find that students have a high propensity to attend those institutions versus trying to get students to leave their home community and go to another college, for example. So depending on what we find, that could have different implications for the types of policies that we design to kind of promote college access and success, and also the emphasis we might place on kind of investing in colleges within specific communities versus trying to get students to leave their communities to go elsewhere to optimize their chances of college success, for example.
Need that. Any other questions or comments from the board? Not too familiar with the place-based data sets that you have in the proposal. I mean, are those some things that we could see in a data dictionary format, or is this something, I mean, I just don't have enough knowledge of what that would look like, because neighborhood characteristics certainly can become PII for sure. So if you could speak or expand more on that.
Sure, and I'll say that these are measures that Dr. Kang is probably most familiar with, but and I'll say that they've been used in his research specifically to examine things like the spread of COVID-19 during the pandemic, right? So measures of things like the human mobility patterns, or things like the walkability of different communities, as well as like the street view images that kind of give a sense of like the quality, the quality of the infrastructure or the environment that is available to students. So I can't think of any way that that data would be PII.
Right.
So essentially in our statistical models, we have students nested in schools, nested in communities, right? And the community characteristics will basically be entered as like level 3 variables, where we'll derive these different measures of the unemployment rate and median earnings, as well as things like the walkability of the community and the quality of the infrastructure and so forth. And the reason we think that's important kind of theoretically is because there's like push and pull factors related to whether students stay in their community versus go somewhere else. And sometimes we view, for example, the characteristics of crime or unemployment or so forth as like pull factors, that it's like, oh, these are challenges that folks face in their community that might prevent them from making the transition to higher education. But they could also be considered kind of push factors, right? So if a community is really strong and you find a very close-knit community with these like walkability measures, right, or other measures of the community, then those could be pull factors that could potentially be inversely related to college going, right? So that's why we think the measures are theoretically important, and these would not be any PII, they would not be student level, individual level. There would be no way to link any of that data with individuals within our data set. It would only be entered as like at the county level or census tract level type information, if that helps.
Yeah, eventually I think we'll need it in a data dictionary.
And that's fine. Sorry, I didn't directly
Yeah,
answer that
as a
question, but we'd be happy to provide
yes.
that type of data dictionary as well.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? We have a comment on our notes. If you could please amend and specify all the TEA's test score data, grade level, subject, in that level of detail.
Sure, I could do that as well. Just if it's helpful for now, it would likely be but a combination of both like 8th grade test scores as well as some end of course exams. We'll probably rely on something like 8th grade measures because we're looking at so many cohorts and the testing regimes change so much over time, as the end of course exams didn't exist for half of the time period that we'll be looking at. So it'll be a combination of TOS, TAX, and STAR, but probably focused on 8th grade measures of math and ELA.
Great. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Do I have a motion to approve with the amendment to add the detail about the test score data? And I'll go ahead and put it in the amendment to remove the JET reference.
Thank you.
Throw that in. Yeah.
This is Kathy. I move to approve. Sorry, Holly.
This is Holly. I second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thanks for being here.
Thank you all so much.
All right, proposal 14, including remote access request UTA 289, education, global talent, and the supply of high-skilled STEM labor in Texas. Anyone here to talk about this one?
Yeah, sure. So good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me well? Perfect. My name is Beatrice Rashi. I'm here with Gear Ung, my colleague and co-author in this project. We're both PhD students at UCLA Anderson. We're requesting Texas ERC data to study the Texas STEM pipeline from high school through college and into the workforce. So our project has two fronts. One front looks at pre-college exposure to STEM. So Texas has invested heavily in expanding computer science courses in high school. We ask, does this lead to more STEM majors and higher earnings? And does this close gaps for women and underrepresented minorities? The other front of our project looks at post-college. So, for example, the Federal STEM Optional Practical Training Program, OPT, lets international graduates in STEM work in the US for up to 3 years. So one of the questions we ask is, does Texas retain this talent? And what are the effects on domestic graduates? As well as, does international tuition help universities support in-state students? And we would also like to estimate the earnings return to high demand STEM majors. So we believe this project will provide new evidence on how early educational investments, as well as federal student policies, how they interact and how they shape the composition and performance of the high-skilled workforce in the state of Texas. Gear and I will be happy to take any questions, and we would just like to say we really appreciate your consideration and any comments you may have.
Great, thank you. Questions or comments from the board for the researchers? Questions, comments?
Am I correct assuming that for your research, you're assuming the majority of international undergrads are F1 visa holders, not the other types?
Gear, would you like to answer that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? There are more affluent?
So you're assuming that most undergrads, international undergrads, are F1 visa holders for you to do this study, right?
Yes, exactly. So there are F1 student visa holder, which is visitor non-immigrant visa holders, and we can see their international student status in the race variables in the higher education records, which is usually defined as non-resident alien. Yes, that's true.
Okay, thank you. One more comment, one more question, sorry. Actually two more. You said, I think the proposal, you mentioned you're interested in public institutions, but is it for control variable reason that you're requesting private and the career school data as well? Or can you specify the reasons for expanding beyond the public higher education data?
Yes, so the STEM OPT policies apply for both public and private institutions. And as for K through 12 private institutions, we also believe the expansion of classes such as computer science would be an interesting part of the study.
We don't have any K-12 private data.
So for the higher education, they would also be, yes, thank you.
We need to request detail on this testing. Yeah, I think similar to the last one, you could include some detail about the testing data, K-12 testing data you're requesting. the test names, what grades.
Perfect. We would include that.
Great. All right. Any other questions or comments? And if not, do I have a motion to approve with the amendment to add the detail about the testing data?
This Holly, I motion to approve with the requested amendments.
I'll second Celeste.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you
you
so
for the
much.
All right, proposal 15, including remote access request UTA 290, documenting and decomposing state returns to higher education, evidence from Texas.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity to present this project proposal. We're really excited about it. My name is Natalie Millar, and I am an economist at Stanford University. My co-author is Jacob Light. Unfortunately, he's teaching, so he couldn't be here today, or otherwise he would be. So apologies for that. And I study the returns to public subsidies on individual and education labor market outcomes, and Jacob also does similar research. So this project, just to give you an overview, examines the public return on investment to Texas higher education system by examining how state appropriations to public universities, colleges and universities, translate into economic benefits for the state. We're going to answer this broad overview by 3 research questions. The first is, which type of public higher education institutions generate the highest ROI for the state of Texas? Second is, through which channels do these institutions generate the returns, such as degree completion or earnings growth? And then third, how does the Texas ROI change when funding levels or allocation across these institutions change? Methodology-wise, we're going to estimate student level value added using 3 research designs: selection on observables, selection on unobservables, and an instrumental variable approach. The research design will compare outcomes among students who are similar prior to college, but who attend different public institutions. And this research project would not be possible without the rich administrative student level data that the ERC provides and accumulates over time. We see the benefits to Texas education and policy as threefold: that this project supports 60x, 30x, TX strategic plan, which calls for at least 60% of Texans between the ages of 25 and I had a wrong note. I think it's 34 or 64. So I just wrote 24 in my note and that was incorrect. But of those of the working age to hold a post-secondary credential by 2030, which is fast approaching. So achieving these goals requires a few things, such as expanding access to higher education, but also ensuring that the public investment translates into timely completion, in-state employment, which we think is really important here, and earnings that strengthen the Texas economy. So we will estimate the public ROI to Texas higher education and provide policymakers with evidence, data-driven evidence, on which post-secondary investments most effectively advance the state's attainment and workforce goals. Thank you so much for your consideration. I look forward to your comments and questions. Oh, I should mention, we do have, I realized on this call about the supplementary data, so we would like to integrate the IPEDS data for at the institution level state appropriations data, and we did not realize that we needed to submit an additional data dictionary for that. So if that's indeed the case, please let us know, and we're absolutely happy to do that.
Great, thank you. Of
course.
Questions or comments from the board for the researchers?
I can't unmute. I'm so sorry. I have just a wondering, and this maybe will be not necessarily for a proposal update, but how you're thinking about the state's permanent university funds and Texas University funds, the PUF and the TUF, which are separate from the base funds and substantial, like how that factors into the work that you're doing with respect to investment and return on that investment.
That's a great question. We were looking mainly at, what's reported in the IPEDS data. I'm not aware if these for the funds that you're mentioning right now are actually included in those, but that's something I can certainly look into. So it sounds like it's not, is what I'm seeing, the Hollies. So is this additional data that we can pull, that we can integrate into the analysis as second supplementary data? If so, that we can certainly address it that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly publicly accessible, and I would strongly encourage it because it's
Absolutely.
hundreds of millions of dollars a year for certain institutions.
Thank you so much, Kathy. That's very helpful. So in that case, we would like to submit 2 supplementary data sets and can provide the data dictionaries at the institution level.
I mean, Melissa's questions relate to other proposals too. I mean, could you speak more on, I mean, you mentioned that your findings will be helpful for policymakers, but, could you expand that point to, how would your findings, let's say, benefit any policy tools that will result in the educational benefits or any policies? I mean, any more details that you can add to that?
Yeah, I'm happy to. If you have something more specific in mind that I don't bring up, please let me know. But we're thinking about if the state legislature, if they have another dollar to allocate to a higher education institution, really where would they get the most bang for their buck? And it could be the case where you allocate this dollar to your, strongest, most research intensive institution. However, it's not obvious that those students, remain in the state and that the state actually benefits from that post-secondary investment. So even though someone may make on average higher earnings at, say, the University of Texas Austin relative to the University of North Texas per se, if the individual that graduates from the University of Austin leaves the state, whereas someone at the University of North Texas actually does not leave the state, they remain in the state and they are contributing to the Texas economy, then we can think about where that additional dollar should go. Actually, it's not obvious where that should go. So this analysis could provide information to the state of Texas on which institutions provide the most bang for their buck. And so thinking about if the state was going to increase their funding towards higher education institutions or make a change towards higher education institutions, they can make a more data-driven, informed decision. So that's where we're thinking about the policy levers more at the state level.
Yeah, I think in that case, it is even more important to make sure we find information about the PUF and the TUF and all of the state funding sources for not just universities, but the other publics.
100%. Thank you so much.
And then this also goes to the FERPA exception justification. So I think this study might better be fitting to studies since you're not evaluating any defined statutory programs or policy, and then really linking close to, I'm still not really understanding how this can really, I guess practical application to policy and education. So I think any clarification and more details might be helpful in the amendment. Yeah.
Sure. So with FERPA, the studies exemption, we thought the audit maybe be more appropriate, but you obviously have more experience with this than we do. So we're happy to update for the studies. And the second, if I give more detail on thinking about increasing the workforce participation rate, in the state of Texas and having those people be qualified with post-secondary credentials, then thinking about, where those dollars are going to be spent to increase the post-secondary credential rate is the way this study could be directly useful to that.
I think that makes better sense.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the audit evaluation is really for if you haven't had a specific, like one of which funding source policy you're evaluating, but it sounds like it's meant to be more general, right? So, okay.
Yes, thank you. Happy to adjust that.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Then do I have a motion to approve with the amendment to update the FERPA statement and update the benefit to Texas policy section?
This is Kathy. I move with the articulated agreement. I move to approve with the articulated agreements.
Great. Have a second?
This is Angie. I'll second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
All right, so we'll move now to item 8, consultation with legal counsel to receive legal advice. Don't think we have anything needed for that today. So we'll move on to item 9, consideration of possible action to approve amendments or repeal of existing ERC advisory board policies. So we sent out the COVID extension policy, which was implemented in COVID, obviously. So wanted to entertain the idea that we repeal the COVID extension policy, but and I'll open it up to board discussion about that. I don't know if anybody
I'm
feels
support. I'll weigh in. I would be supportive of a repeal because it was contextual in its initial creation, and we have other mechanisms for addressing extensions that are standard operating procedure.
Great.
Yeah, I would too.
Okay. All right, then do I have a motion to approve the repeal of the COVID extension policy? Or motion to repeal?
I'll move to approve the COVID extension repeal.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. All right. I have a motion to adjourn. Thank you, everybody, before we adjourn. Thank you for all of the hard work everybody puts into this. So researchers, board members. But I have a motion to adjourn.
I do like sorry.
Okay.
I think there's just been some questions, and I like how Kathy used the word wondering. Yeah, about the proposals that were submitted that require supplemental data at the aggregate level or public facing, whatever. I'm just trying to know what the next step is. So do they submit this data dictionary as an additional data request, or do we provide that data dictionary to you?
Can we follow up with y'all about it?
Oh,
in an
you want to
email?
follow up? You
Or
want to talk
can
to
we be
legal?
specific? Is that okay? I want to make sure we
Consultation needs to
lay it out.
happen, Paul. Consultation needs to
Yes.
Okay, so Melissa, you'll just follow up with
Absolutely.
us in an email?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Okay.
Appreciate your patience as we consult.
Okay, I understand. Okay. Okay, this is helpful.
Oh, yeah. Natalie, did you have?
Yeah, I was just wondering, will you also let us know what the decision is? I meant to ask that earlier about supplementing. So after y'all have consulted, would you mind like letting the researchers know what the decision is, or is it best for us to reach out to someone? I just wanted to make sure I wrote down
I think the
what
ERC directors will communicate out to you all.
Okay, amazing. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. See ya. Bye.
Okay, great.
Good conversation. Motion to adjourn?
Yes. Thank you.
I move to adjourn. This is Jackie.
I'll second Celeste.
Great.
Yes.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion approved.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all so much.